Welcome to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Glad to have you back. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be waking up at 3:30 in the morning instead of 4:30 in the morning. I don't know how you're adjusting to this time zone, but it's going to take me a few days to get back on track. But hey, it gives me more time to lay in bed and read, doesn't it? And that's what it's all about, books. All things books here on the Rare Book Cafe. You can find us being published online every Saturday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, 9:30 Pacific Standard Time, and whatever time it is over there on the Greenwich Mean Line going through the center of England. And you can not only find us on Facebook and YouTube, you can also find us at your favorite podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, all of those guys carry us. And when you're looking for us over there on those sites, we're called Rare Book Cafe Raw. We put a little raw on the end because you don't get to see all the visuals and the pictorials. Our show this week is mostly a show of regulars. Towards the end of the show, I'm going to have a little bit more about my travels over in the Balkins and the bookstores that I experienced and some of the authors that I experienced as well. But we're going to start out the show with David Hess from Orange Books in Orange, California. David has the most delightful segment called Things Found in Books. And then we're going to have a report from my co-host, Lee Linn. Lee traveled all the way up from Georgia to West Virginia, drove up all by herself, stopping at bookstores along the way to visit with another show contributor, Mary Kay Watson. And those two ladies went out on the town prowling around antique stores and bookstores, and they're going to be filing some video of what they encountered. And we'll see if Lee also learned how to use some of those new colorful magic pens she's been wanting Mary Kay to teach her about. Also following that, we're going to have Richard Mori posting to us. We've missed Richard. He's quite the road warrior. We've missed him a little bit in the last few weeks. He's just been all over the place. And I think we're finally going to corral him and get him in a corner, get him on the phone, and see what he's got to share with us. But first, we're going to start off the show today with everybody's favorite segment, Things Found in Old Books. And one of the things that we're going to see here is a stock certificate from 1926, where a company was lowering the price of the company stock so that more employees could buy shares. I wonder if that's how we got into trouble in 1929. Oh, well, that's a history lesson. Also, one of the things that he found in books is a tintype. Now, what's a tintype? I got to tell you, I don't really collect tintypes, but when I find them, I do buy them. I got a couple of them, just happen to have a couple here. Here's one. And you'll notice if you look real close, you can see that it's been colored in. His cheeks are rosy and his bow tie is blue. And it's also an insight to what people looked like back then. Look at those big mutton chops on that guy. Here's one of a husband and wife. Here's one of a husband and wife setting for the photograph. And getting your picture taken back then was a big deal. Everybody put on their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes and stood at a brisk pose for the camera to snap its shutter. And sometimes they were just headshots. Here's one that's really kind of small, probably only 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch, and just a headshot of somebody. I've got a whole box of them over here, and they're so much fun. Tintypes were also known as millennial-types or ferrotypes. It's a photograph made by creating a direct positive on a thin sheet of metal coated with a dark lacquer or enamel and used to support the photographic emulsions. Tintypes enjoyed their greatest popularities in the 1860s and the 1870s. You'll see lots of them with Civil War soldiers. That was a big deal to get into town and have your photograph taken. But eventually, early in the 20th century, the medium began to perish until it was revived. Uh, I know 1990s. All things old are new again. All right, folks. So here's now our session with David Hess. Bring it on, David.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange with our broadcast of things found in old books. And today we're going to share a number of things that I found, including a couple things that people had sent me in that I'm excited to share with you. So let's get started. Today, in this book here called The Cowpert Rotary, published in 1925. It's a collection of magazines with really cool ads in it, I might add. Gorgeous, from the 1925 for the Rotary Club. And inside was this little piece of paper, a little notification. It's an important notice to employees. The price of stock for all new subscribers up to April 15th, 1926, under the employee stock plan shall be $30 a share. The price is several dollars under the present market. Opportunity for those eligible to subscribe for stock at $30 a share shall definitely expire on April 15th, 1926 by the trustees under employee stock plan. And so there you go. You got a little notice, probably with your paycheck. And well, that was 1926. So 3 years later, in 1929, when the stock market crashed, it was probably worth nothing. I hope they cashed it in early. In this book, Disraeli, by Mori, published in the 30s, I found this little ad, or not really an ad, a little pamphlet showing different styles of monograms that you can put on your silverware, your knives and your forks and your spoons, and you have all kinds of beautiful lettering and monograms to add to your silverware to make it, personally yours. And they have beautiful examples, really gorgeous lettering and styling, and all in the style of 1925. And you have the Old English, the Premier, and the New American. It's a really interesting item, I thought. Really beautiful, and the design of the pamphlet was very striking as well. Now, one from my archives, like I found this about 7 years ago in a book. I don't remember what the book was, but I found it, put it in my drawer, and never known what to do with it. So I get to share it now. It's a tin type, and just like it says, it's a little piece of tin with a photograph on it. And now tin types were real popular in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. In this case, it shows a rather dour, matronly woman in the garb of the day, collar up to here and a hat, and a little scarf there. And I thought it was very interesting. And I'm sure there's collectors out there for tin types, and this is just one of many that are probably out there, but I like it. And then two people shared some stuff with me this week, and I'm glad to share them here today. One was from a customer of mine who sent me an email saying, this is from Tanya Dang Wu, and she sent me a little note. It's an inscription in a book she found, and she didn't know if it qualified as things found in old books, but what the heck? It was in an old book. Why not? She found it in a little children's book that she had bought. And it said, inscription reads, "Too cold on your first birthday. Just think, this year your mom and dad bought a house for you. By the time you're 5 or 6, they'll be getting you the moon. Love, Brian and Nancy." Yeah, that's a cute one. And hope the kid still has the book. Well, he probably doesn't, because Tanya has it now. Anyway, so thank you, Tanya, for sharing that with me. And secondly, I got this email from Mike Callahan, who runs a Facebook page out here called used bookstores of Southern California. And I don't believe he still runs it, but he sent this along. He's a big fan of the show. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for watching. This is Mike Callahan. I found this book on a book run to Bakersfield in 2018. It's an autobiography of Margaret Alverson, who ran a well-known music school in Northern California. She published a book describing her career, 60 Years of California Song. She died January 17th, 1923 in Oakland. The inside front cover has a nicely written inscription from a loving father to his daughter Priscilla. Priscilla is traveling from her home in New York to Northern California to pursue a career in singing. And most appropriate gift, but given it is 1925 and the book was published in 1913, it is long out of print. Her father writes the publisher, Sunset Press, and they report back that the original publisher is out of business. Touched by the father's letter, they search the old business records, find a file copy, and they're sending it to him as a free gift to his daughter. So included is a picture of the letter that the publisher sent to the father. It's quite nice. So while 60 Years of California Song might not be a rare book, this particular copy is truly one of a kind. It sure is, and I'm glad to share it here, Mike, and I appreciate you sending that along. And if anybody else wants to send me something that I would share on this show, please send it along to email me a picture of the thing you found and the book, and a little description of what it is and how you found it. Send it to oldbook@ebookman.com. That's oldbook@ebookman.com. Well, that's all I have for today, and I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, David. Also interesting, also fascinating. The thing that I love is that people from all over the country are now sending David the things that he's found in books, that they've found in books for him to share with you and for me. Don't miss David on Facebook and on Instagram. It's got a lot of fun things to share there as well. All right, everybody. It's time for an increasingly popular segment on our show. Where's Richard Mori? Well, he hasn't been on the show for the last couple of weeks because he was either dislocated or a bit under the weather, and he's still got a little cloud hanging over his head. Clear that throat, Richard, because we're ready to bring you on board. Right now, today, he's stable. There he is. He's stable today, but soon to hit the road.
Well, Ed, thank you for the introduction, and it's nice to have you back. I felt I was taking your place while you were gone.
Well, I want to thank you for the item which I purchased. Everybody, Richard mentioned this 4 or 5 shows ago.
Oh.
It's called the West Point Story. It's a scholastic game, and being an alumni of West Point, I had never seen one before, and I scooped that up, and thank you for sending it on. It got here in great shape. Thank you, Richard.
Well, good. I hope we can have the same experience with Lee's box of books I sent her.
Well, yeah, and this is not something I'm going to put up for resale right away. I'm sure you find those things from time to time. You find something and it just gives you some emotional attachment, and it sits on the shelf for a couple of years. Then when you're done enjoying it, you say, all right, now I'm ready to sell it.
And of course, there is the landmark book that goes with that game.
It was in there. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yep. Signed by Red Blake.
Yes. Yeah. That the first printings all have the letter that came with it. So, but the letters often got separated. So, Ed, my travels this last few weeks have been really interesting. I did a weekend show at the Boy Scout camp here in New Hampshire. I had a great time. Guys who flew in from all over the country for that event. They've been doing it almost 40 years, actually. It's
are these scout leaders?
Well, most of them are kind of what we call retired, but they collect the ephemera and the patches and things. And they actually, a lot of the guys in the group are real historians, and they put together documentation to show the vintage and the progress of the vintage. And scout patches, people don't understand this about scout patches. The early ones, I can make more money out of my vest pocket with the right patches than a van load of books.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
It's
collectible, eh?
if you have the right stuff. Yeah. Um, it but it's not easy to get the right stuff, and you have to know what you're looking for. Um, and that's distinguishes the amateur from the pros, so to speak.
Sure.
And hear me, there's a lot of that. It's the minutia of that, Ed, just would blow your mind away. But
Well,
then
you
this,
seem to be in an interesting spot there, more Richard. That you know, you're as a book dealer, you also bleed over into the antiques and the ephemera and the
yeah,
three-dimensional world, and you seem
yeah.
to have a good grasp on lots of those knowledge nodes.
Well, it makes my job fun. I,
Yeah,
I like I like the variety. And it's and I learn so much from the people I interact with. You know, my customers, and many of them are friends, especially in the Boy Scout world. You know, we
sure.
see each other at other places at other times, um, and it's fun to catch up. And it's a nice time. I do that one Boy Scout show now. That I used to travel for others, but I'm down to just the one here in New Hampshire.
Well, you know, I was a scout leader for 18 years from the time my oldest son was a Cub Scout, and then the time my youngest son became an Eagle Scout was 18 years. And
Wow.
about the only thing we've collected from all those years in the Scouts are the Pine Wood Derbies. And boy, those were fun.
Oh,
Those
those are
little,
great.
those
Yep,
little things are still sitting on a shelf.
yep. They're wonderful. You know the process of doing that in a cub pack is really just exciting. I was a
Yeah.
cub master myself
Hmm.
at one time.
Yeah, nothing more fun than Derby Day.
And that's right. Back in the I was cub master back in the 70s, and we had one of the first racetracks that had an electronic eye.
Oh,
I
that quieted down the parents.
Yeah, it the the committee, the Cup Pack committee I had was probably the best committee I had ever worked with on any project at all. The chairman was the manager of a shoe company in Bangor, Maine, and he took charge of that. His job was to run the committee. My
Hmm.
job was to run the pack. We both did our jobs extremely well, and we had hundreds of people that would show up at each event, and
Cool.
I just had to be an MC. It was really great.
Very good.
So, anyways, we got sidetracked.
Hey,
So,
yeah.
guess where I've been at? I've been to Chantilly, Virginia, called the Big Flea. It
Ooh.
it's they do it I think 4 or 5 times a year. I try to get there at least once a year because this last year they most of their shows were canceled. They came back online this summer, and they did one in September, and then they did another one in this past weekend in November. But they get a big traffic. It's a huge hall, about 500 booths. So it's a fairly large event, and I've always found buying there extremely good. And I'm actually really there's only like there's 3 of us who do books. Jerry Showalter was there from Maryland, and another gentleman whose name I'm going to forget at the moment. But there's the 3 of us. We all know each other, and but we're the only 3 book people per se. But
Hmm.
I found stuff, Ed, I could only dream of. Let me let me start with this is a box of miniature books.
Oh
This
yeah,
is
we
what
mentioned this. Yeah, tell us about that.
so it
A whole box of them.
a whole box of them. I
How
couldn't believe.
miniature? What size are we talking?
Well, we have micro miniatures here,
Oh, they'll fit on your thumb.
just about. And then we have this was one of my personal favorites. I think my personal favorites. This is a finger Bible.
Ooh, tall and skinny.
Tall and I've never seen one, um, and really unusual. It has, I don't know if that light's too bright. I think the light's too bright.
Yeah, a
For
little
you.
bit, but
Yeah,
we get it.
yeah. The but really, And this came all from one woman, a collector. I bought them from the daughter. The mother's passed, and the daughter was selling her things, and she was very pleased to sell them to me as a dealer because she's a dealer herself in antiques, and she knew they were going to a good home and that I would find good homes for these things. There's one of the things I really like. I'd never seen this one before. This is a set. Let's see. This is, I don't know if you can, probably can't read it, right?
I can't read it, but I can see the set. Oh, that looks like a box.
It
A
is
boxed set.
a box set of miniatures. Can you believe that?
No, I can't.
I've never seen anything like it. And
What's the subject on those?
It's the bibliography second supplement. It's and I can't.
Well, I'm not sure I would read it if it were full size.
Yeah. But it's a famous press that did miniature books. And I know that Alan's got to put pictures up that I sent him on some of this stuff, but I wanted to just kind of highlight a couple of these. But in this, there's more like this. I got about, I don't know, there's probably over 50 or 60 different pieces. This being one of the more unusual ones here. This is it's it's more of a decorative piece, but I thought that was cute. And then in top of it, there were some books on the subject of
books about books.
Books about books. And there was 4 or 5 of those. So, and Alan's, I think, going to show pictures of that. So I won't try to.
How are you thinking about marketing that, Richard? Are you going to market it as a collection or one each?
Well, I would love to market it as a collection because I think, somebody put a lot of time and energy to build this collection.
It'd be nice to keep it together if you could.
It would be, but I'm also a realist to know that many people who might like these are also going to have some of them and only need some of the pieces. So I'm gonna I know a couple of miniature book people, and I haven't even contacted them yet, but we'll see how it goes. I'll do what the market needs, I guess. Yeah. But here's that was the first thing that excited me. And then the next day she brought in a box of books for me to look at. And
same woman?
Same woman. This
is
a
Leben. It looks German.
It is German. It's a Megendorfer. These are the Megendorfer is the I'd call him the crown prince of mechanical books. He's just wonderful mechanicals, beautiful colors. Mm-hmm. There are eight mechanicals in here. I'm not going to make them work, but these all do work.
Wow.
And again, Alan's going to put some pictures up anyways, but I just want to.
Now, are these two-dimensional mechanicals or are they pop-ups?
They're two-dimensional mechanicals. There's 8 of them in this. These are circa 1890 in that period. My research early on says there are no copies of any of the Megendorfers available for sale at the moment online. He's very, very desirable in the market. And I've had some Megendorfers before, but every time I've had one, they've needed a lot of repair. And people do repair the Megendorfers, but it's also expensive to repair them. So that was exciting. And then to add to it, and again, Alan's going to put some pictures up. I'm going to take this right out of the box. So again, now this is actually a very famous book about Kate Greenaway.
Sure.
Except this copy is one of 500 of a limited edition and includes an original drawing.
No way.
By Kate Greenaway. It's tipped in the book and it's signed authenticated by her son John Greenaway as being one of her drawings. Each of the 500 copies has a different drawing. So there's no two books are the same. This is number 34
Excellent.
in the limited. And the binder's box is gorgeous, and this book is in perfect condition. There's nothing more to be said other than
Wow. Are the drawings from some of her other children's books? Like
um,
preliminaries?
I would think that's what they're going to be. I haven't researched this drawing enough to know if this one is. This one is three young girls lounging in chairs. It looks like maybe even reading to each other. One of them has a parasol over her shoulder.
Good find.
Yeah, it so and it went on and on because on top of it, and I didn't send Alan pictures of these, but so I will only just show you covers. This is Kate Greenaway's Mother Goose, Little Ann, Little Pussycat, the Queen of Pirate Island, and actually one of the ones that I really was excited to see because I've never seen this is called Little Men and Little Women.
Oh.
It comes with a 4-page piece of ephemera explaining it, and then I think there are 14 images all mounted in this gather. And
very nice.
Yeah, it's one of those things I hadn't seen before. I always find it exciting when something new comes to me. And it actually just kept going because another thing I picked up, which I'm a big fan of books that have things in them. So here's another example, and I think I sent Alan a picture of this too. This is a children's book on sewing, and it has the thread and other materials inside, and it's meant to obviously teach young children how to sew. So those kinds of things are always exciting and fun to find. And as you can see, the buying was all over the place. And the selling
Speaking
as
of children sewing, do you come across many samplers out there? The late 1700, 1800, where children prove their sewing prowess by stitching the alphabet into numbers.
I've had a few of those over the years. Because I circulate in the antique world, I do pay attention to that. They've gotten very expensive. Anything before 1830s, especially before 1800, before 1800 it's become really expensive, but even before 1830 they can have a good number on them. They do show up, but a lot of them have already been claimed in the market.
Very good.
So that's pretty much it. I don't think there was anything else I left out of that. There's and most of this stuff is what I'm going to start doing on my trip. I leave next week for the
Where are you going?
Next week I leave for Syracuse, New York. There's a big big antique show at the fairgrounds in Syracuse the weekend before Thanksgiving. And when that show is done, I leave from there to head towards where am I going? Oh, Columbus, Ohio. I'm going to stop in North Tonawanda and visit a friend who has a bookstore, Ron Cozy, and spend a few days with him. And then I'm going to head out to Columbus, Ohio, to the Columbus Big Antique Show that's held at the fairgrounds at that event. I've got some real nice customers out there. I'm hoping that I'll have some of this stuff with me when I get there. But if not, I'll be happy to have sold it too. And then I take a couple weeks. I meander down towards Atlanta, and then the second weekend in December, I'm going to be in Atlanta at Scott's Antiques show in Atlanta, and then to Florida.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
on the road with Richard Mori.
Well, that's what we do.
Yeah,
But
you
it's
put some miles behind you.
well,
Are you going to fit everything in the van, or are you hauling a trailer, or how
well,
much stuff do
when
you
I go
actually have?
when I go to Florida, I actually do bring a trailer, um, primarily because I want to have a little extra inventory. And this year, I'm going to be in Florida an extra month because of the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair is the first weekend in April, and
Oh,
so
come on.
I'm
It's
not.
because of the weather. Tell the truth.
Yeah, never the weather. but but I also this summer I bought a bunch of books in Florida, and I got 25 boxes of books down there. I need to get up here, so I'm going down with a less loaded trailer this time, so I can bring some back.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to hearing what you found in those boxes.
Well, they'll be actually there's some very interesting stuff in the things I left in Florida. So that'll be another show, another time.
And I hope that you'll be able to check in with us from Tonawanda or Canton or Atlanta or whatever American city you happen to find yourself in.
Well, I will, and I'll keep you abreast. And when that special find comes along, I'll let you know.
Speaking of abreast, Turkey Day's coming. What's your favorite part of the turkey, Richard?
You know what I like? After Thanksgiving, I love a turkey sandwich, cold turkey, stuffing on top, and cranberry sauce.
Yes, sir, Bob.
In between two slices of wheat bread. There's nothing better than that, I think.
Well, thanks for sharing your recipe. I think most of us can put that one together.
Yes, that's one of the reasons I like it. It's simple.
Well, thanks again, Richard. I hopefully will see you at least once more before Thanksgiving. If not, you enjoy that sandwich.
I will. Thanks, Ed, and glad you're back.
Get rid of that cough, please.
I'm working on it.
All right. Love you, Richard. Always glad to have you on the show. Keep smiling.
Thanks, Ed. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What a character that guy is. I've never seen him not smile. He's always got a upbeat and positive A+ attitude. Thank you for sharing with us today, Richard. Always good to have you on board. Man, you find the coolest stuff too. I wonder how many miles a year you're putting on that van of yours. It sure gets around. Okay, folks, now it's time for our co-host, Lee Linn, to share with us her report on visiting with Mary Kay Watson up there in West Virginia. Let's dial into that pre-recorded segment and see what those two ladies were up to.
We are in Flatwoods, West Virginia. We've come down here to go to this antiques mall, Sisters Antiques Mall in Flatwoods, West Virginia. It's right off of I-79. So the interstate right there. It's kind of a busy area. It's actually the closest thing to the geographical center of West Virginia where there's any kind of population. So they do some conventions here, and there's a few hotels. And, it's a tiny area compared to Tampa and some of the other areas where our listeners come from. But Lee and I are going to go in here. Yeah, it's getting cold out here. We're going to go inside. It's about 27 degrees. We're going to go inside and check out the books. Okay. I just want to show everyone who the camera operator is. Hello.
Yes, I'm the camera.
Mary Kay here, behind this camera, saying hello to all the Rare Book Cafe viewers today. Hope you're having a nice day. We are shopping. We're having a wonderful day.
Okay, I'm looking through some cookbook brochures, some from, like this one is from Hot Point. This one is from the Culinary Arts Institute. We have a candy book. Pillsbury, who put out a lot of this kind of thing. Some of these are kind of interesting. Most of them not particularly. It's just in a rotten shape.
Found a whole wall of books here that she's going through.
It's mostly children's books. And looking ahead to the Florida show, where the theme is going to be the Children's Hour, I don't always have a lot of children's books, so on this trip I've been on the lookout for some new material. Unfortunately, a lot of these are, of course, reprints. But or like this is a copy of Lad by Albert Payson Terhune, but it's a Grosset and Dunlap, which is going to be a reprint.
So tucked away up here in the corner above these books is a little Maxfield Parrish print. Looks like it's in its original frame. They want $75 for it, so I don't think I'm going to get that. It's a little high. I did get a Maxfield Parrish print about 3 times this size at the Antiquarian Book Fair the last time we had it. And so it's been about 3 years ago. And I paid much less for it. Anyway, we're going to continue looking.
When I was growing up, when you had to do book reports, you looked for the little orange books put out by Bobbs Merrill. They were biographies of famous Americans. They were usually an easy read and could be found in your school library very easily. So I have found this one. It's not from my era. It's from 1961. It's a biography of Frances Willard, who was very active in women's suffrage movement, in women's temperance movements, was a reformer for women's rights.
Here's another gorgeous Maxfield Parrish. I actually have this one, but it's smaller. This one appears to be close to probably 32 inches by maybe 20 or 18. It's huge and it's very nice, not faded, and the frame looks like it's original. Lee's getting a leg up on the next Antiquarian Book Fair. I don't know where that leg came from, but
We know it's not going with us.
yes, it's not going with us, but she has found something interesting.
I found an 1898 edition of Strand magazine. Strand magazine was known for being the vehicle that Arthur Conan Doyle published a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and this has an excerpt from one of the Holmes stories, and this one was one I had never heard of, but that doesn't mean a lot. And let's see if I can get to it and tell you what it is. It's The Tragedy of the Korosko.
Yes.
So anyway, but Strand is always an interesting magazine, and this is a nice old copy.
Thank you for sharing. Well, this is my haul. I got a library card box and 4 Hitchcock chairs, paperweight, a turtle shell, and a couple inkwells. And we will send you a film of the books that Lee has picked up on her journeys during this trip. Whenever we get home, we'll lay it all out on the table for you.
Yesterday and today, I've had the opportunity to rummage through Mary Kay's libraries. And since she was eager to part with some of her accumulated books, I had a lot of fun. Something I really hadn't anticipated having such a good time doing. It's a 1929 Blackstone's Secrets of Magic. And there are only a couple of these available, so this is a real find. A book of sketches done by Orson Welles for his daughter. And this wonderful picture book by an Australian writer called The Sign of the Seahorse, a tale of greed and high adventure in 2 acts. So it's really kind of like a little drama. Plus lots of other stuff. These 3 boxes are all books that I'm buying from Mary Kay. There are Florida books, there are children's books, there are first edition fiction, everything from, let's see, Mark Twain, Captain Stormfield, just from the uniform edition, to a first of Cannery Row, second state, to a wonderful box full of oversized children's illustrated books, which will be going with me to St. Petersburg.
And don't forget that Marjorie Rawlings.
And yes, and a copy of Cross Creek, first edition of Cross Creek. So I'm now handing over the check to her, minus what I gave her at the mall the other day to pay for the Hitchcock chairs, of course. So I think now that we are even, and we are waiting for Dennis to load the car for me. So it's been a fun trip. Here's your check.
We're loading all of the books into the back of Lee's. All right, this is take 2. We're loading the books into Lee's car. My husband, Dennis.
Go. Just anywhere. I'll put a suitcase in here to hold things in place.
Thank you, Lee. Looking forward to having you back next week. Need some help here on the show. We'll see you soon. All right, folks, now it's time for my segment. Just little old me. As you know, I had the tremendous opportunity to go on a 7-week vacation from Greece all the way up to Hungary, traveling through the Balkins of where was I? Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, the Republic of Srpska. That one always cracks me up, the Republic of Srpska. And eventually on into Hungary. And of course, being a book guy, one of the things that I look forward to chasing while I was on the road were bookstores. I have to tell you, I was extremely impressed with how many old-fashioned retail bookstores exist in those countries, especially in the city of Belgrade. The Belgrade in Serbia was just overwhelmed. I was walked down one street, there must have been 5 or 6 bookstores, one right after the other. And I tried to get out there and visit some rare book dealers as well. I'll let you know how that goes. And so this is me in my pre-recorded session of Books in the Balkins. And as you know, I was away for about 7 or 8 weeks, and I was on a bit of a sabbatical vacation, mostly a vacation, just a chance to get away from everything, and spent my time in between the geography between Greece and Hungary, and included in there were the Balkans. Took lots of pictures and took some. The trip did, of course, as a book dealer, a bookseller would, have some interest in literature, poetry from other countries. And I want to share some of that with you through 2 handfuls of photos that I took along the way. And all of these photos are of 3-dimensional art, not necessarily books, but 3-dimensional art of authors. Excuse me. This very first one you see is Saint Jerome. Saint Jerome is the patron saint of libraries, librarians, and historians. Jerome was born on the border of Dalmatia and Croatia, and he's best known for his translation of the Bible into Latin, the translation that became known as the Vulgate, the Latin Vulgate, which he finally completed in the year 405. Jerome attempted to create a translation of the Old Testament based on the Hebrew version rather than the Septuagint, which was the Latin version that came out of Egypt. Jerome was a scholar, and at that time, being a scholar meant that you were fluent in Greek. And he also knew a little bit of Hebrew when he started his translation project. So he picked up and moved to Jerusalem to strengthen his grip, his understanding of the Hebrew language. A wealthy Roman aristocrat by the name of Paula funded his stay in a monastery in Bethlehem, and there he translated the Bible into Latin from Hebrew, one of the very first to do that. He began in 382 and didn't finish until 405. So it took him, 17 years on this project. And that alone is probably enough to have him consecrated as a saint. Prior to Jerome's Vulgate, all Latin translations of the Old Testament were based upon the Septuagint, not the Hebrew Jerome decided to use. A lot of people, including Augustine, did not approve of this. They felt as though that the Septuagint was a divine inspired book. But thanks to him, we've been able to bring forth a much more direct interpretation of the Bible today. Now, this statue of Jerome happened to be in a church, but nonetheless, he's quite the supporter. And if you're a librarian or having most anything to do with books, look up St. Jerome and perhaps he'll give you some inspiration. All right, the next photo is of Marin Držić. Marin Držić is the greatest Croatian playwright of all times. He's one of the most eminent Croatian writers in history, as well as one of the key authors of European Renaissance comedy. And if you look real close, apparently he was a man with a shiny nose. Have you ever observed the tradition of rubbing a bronze statue somewhere on the person, maybe a foot, a hand, or like in the Florence marketplace, there's a bronze of a pig with a shiny rubbed snout. Well, the thing that I loved about traveling through the Balkans are all of these statues. I mean, here in America, we can find statues of Washington and Lincoln, but it's quite rare that we find statues, especially in bronze, of our literary heroes. In the Balkans, they make absolutely no pretense about showing their veneration of these literary heroes in public places. This statue happens to be in Dubrovnik, and for those of you that are Games of Thrones fans, know that Dubrovnik is the city where the HBO series was filmed. And right smack dab in the middle of the square is this statue of Marin. At the time, he was born in 1508, and he lived partly in Italy and partly in his hometown, and usually somewhere in between. It was at that time that Venice and Constantinople shifted in their controls of the Balkans. So he was a bit of a roamer, eventually dying in Venice in 1567. So he died when Shakespeare was only 3 years old. Držić's work covered many fields: lyric poetry, pastorals, political letters, pamphlets, but especially comedies. His comedies are among the best in European Renaissance literature. And as with other great comedy writers like Ben Jonson or Molière, Držić's comedies are full of exuberant life and vitality. They celebrate love and liberty, and they mock the rich, the avarice, the greedy, and egoism of petty tyrants. Wondered what he would write about if he were around today. One interesting tidbit about Marin Držić is that there are no known first-person letters. Somehow or other, all of his original writings seem to have been destroyed, but thankfully for humanity, his words survive. This next statue is of Marko Marulić, the father of Croatian literature. This statue stands right outside of the, right in the middle, actually, of Split. And it's, I'm sorry, I lost my way. It's a monument that can tell a story about the people and the spirit that was molded by their authors. In Split, there are several historic figures who deserve to be remembered by public statues. Right outside the walls of the city is one of Gregory of Nin, a huge 18-foot tall statue. But this one of Mori is right in the middle of Diocletian's palace, one of the oldest and best preserved palaces of the early Roman Empire. Being declared as the father of Croatian literature, in this case, is an understatement. His contribution to the European Renaissance is much bigger. In a time when Mori lived, Split was under Venetian rule, as was most of the Croatian coast. He was born and died in Split, and sometimes he even signed his name as Marcus Marulis Splintisus. So he had quite an attachment to his hometown. He was a nobleman born in today's Poplak Street, which was named after a famous Croatian family, and his family's home is still there. There are two strong references about the influence of Marulik. The first one was he was the first person to use the term psychology. In 1524, he published a book in Latin called Psychologia de Ratione Animi Humanae, or The Psychology of Foundations of Human Soul. Wow, that's quite a note to have on your resume. The first person to use the word psychology. And the second important work from Marulik was Evangelitarium, which was an essay on ethical principles. Actually, the British Library has a copy of this book that belonged to Henry VIII with margin notes written by the famous English king. And judging from those notes, Henry VIII was particularly interested in discussing holy books, but also in, not a big surprise here, the religious views on choosing a spouse. Well, unfortunately for Marulik, most of his other Latin books have been lost to history, but the words that he wrote in the local vernacular still remain. There's one other anecdote about Marulik, which is a little bit funny, but a little bit harrowing. He and one of the members of the Popalik family were both attracted to the same woman. And they both knew it, and they decided to live with it. The two of them were parts of the humanist circle, so being in love and sharing love was probably frowned on in the community, but to them it was a big philosophical idea. According to local stories and rare records, the affair ended in tragedy. The way the story goes is that one night it was Marulik's turn to visit the young lady, but Popalik pleaded with him to go to her bedroom instead, and Marulik let him. But somebody caught the Popalik nobleman and killed him. Uh-oh, probably the father, because the girl was punished by her father, who apparently walled her alive. And it was only 15 years later that the body was discovered in the walls. I wonder what Henry VIII would have to say about that. So Marulik was traumatized by the situation and moved to a monastery on the island of Salta. Okay, boy, some of these authors live a rough life. The next photo that I want to share with you is not necessarily one of a famous author, but this is the photo of in Belgrade of Joseph Broz Tito. Tito was born in 1892, the seventh of 15 children to a poor peasant farmer in a village near Zagreb, Croatia. And he began working on the farm as a young child. After spending years working as a mechanic and other odd jobs, he was drafted into World War I, was wounded, captured by the Russians, and spent time in a prisoner of war camp. Tito soon joined the Red Army, the communist group that rose to power after the Russian Revolution of 1917, and would ultimately lead to the creation of the communist Soviet Union. In 1928, he was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for communist activity back in his home country of Yugoslavia. And the point I want to make here is that many of the artists, the poets, the authors in the Balkans led very tortured lives. It was not uncommon for these radicals, especially in the years between 1919 and the end of the fall of the split up of the Soviet Union, to either be put in prison, to be sacrificed, to have their works denigrated, or even refused to be published. And Tito carried on that same tradition as he managed Yugoslavia and led the Yugoslav Communist Party. Finally breaking away from the Soviets in 1953, actually 1955, after the death of Stalin. He led a very suppressed political country, but the experience of being thrown in jail was not uncommon for many of these artists. This next photo is of an author, Boris Pekic. I absolutely love this statue. I went back 2 days in a row just to see this statue. It is, I mean, he is the coolest guy, sitting there on the steps with a smile on his face. And he is Boris Pekic. He was a political activist and a writer, and he's considered one of the great literary figures of the 20th century, not just of Serbia, continually attracting the attention of scholars and the public. His very thorough knowledge and of the long tradition of European thought, from Plato all the way to Nietzsche, helped him build quite a library of works. And among other literary peers, he counted Dostoevsky, Horace Mann, and James Joyce as peers. And this helped greatly to integrate and invigorate Serbian literature and other major European trends. Throughout his life as an author, Pekic worked on several novels at a time, but he kept very detailed commentaries, was very well organized bibliographically on his works. Very seldom has an author kept this kind of documentation, recording the creative process of a writer being preserved. I found the blog on the Webosphere, which collects his fascinating insights to the writing process. And if you fancy yourself as a budding author, I'd encourage you to check it out, because his mindset was very good in organizing multidisciplinarian pieces. During the 1968 to 1969 period, Pekic was one of the editors of a Serbian, at the time, Yugoslavian literary magazine, The Pilgrim, and his very first novel, The Pilgrimage of Arsenije Negovian, was published, in which one can read and hear the echo of the student protests of 1968 in Yugoslavia. And this, of course, drew the attention of the government. And even though ideologically he was with the opposition movement, he was not quite that overt, but that didn't keep the government from threatening him. Nevertheless, this novel won the Nin Award for the best Yugoslav novel that year. An English translation of the book, The Houses of Belgrade, appeared in 1978 and rarely catapulted his stature. So Pekic thought it was in his best interest to leave the country. For 2 years, they refused to give him a passport. Finally, he emigrated to London in 1971. The Yugoslav authorities still considered him persona non grata for several years and never published a book of his until 1980, when his book, The Rise and Fall of Icarus Gulbenkian, appeared. And it was later translated into many languages: Polish, Hungarian, Czech, and even French. The work is about a soldier in World War II, where the action takes place. But on the core of this book, Pekic critiques the ideology of totalitarian social systems and earned him further dismay amongst the ruling class. Now compare this photo of a dashing, thrilling author with this next photo of Attila Joseph. This photo of Attila appears along the Danube in Hungary. And as you can see, he looks a bit forlorn and a bit worn out. Well, he actually was. He died at a very young age of 32, I believe. But every year, Poetry Day takes place in Hungary on April 11th, and that date has been chosen to honor the memory of one of the greatest Hungarian poets, Attila Joseph, born 117 years ago. Attila was one of the poets, along with the likes of André Ade or Mikolas Renati, who defined modern Hungarian poetry. During his short life from the turn of the 20th century to the late 1930s, he revolutionized poetic writing, addressing in his prolific works everyday topics such as politics, odes, and celebrations of loves or calls for revolutionary upheaval. Joseph says of himself, "My mother was a Cumanian, my father was half Skaleski, half Romanian, or perhaps entirely." You have to understand that the divisions of the geography and the politics in these Balkan countries, and to this day, it's obviously still very divided with the war of the 1990s, just barely 20 years behind us. But those geographies dictated a person's self, a person's worth, and a person's place in society. At the time of his youth, the name Attila wasn't a very well-known name in Hungary. And he'd been put into a foster family, and they tried to change his name, further giving him some weighty personal, emotional issues. For a while there, he was called the poet without a name. And he spent his rest of his short life looking for affiliations and bonds with others. Deprived of his own name, he spent a large part of his young years looking after pigs for his foster family. A very tragic story. He died only at the age of 43. And we're going to finish up my portion here at the end with a short poem by him. The greatest lyric poet of his time. So this statue of Attila overlooks the Danube, and interesting, it's right next to the Hungarian parliament, the same parliament that subjected him one time and embraced him and others. It appears to him sitting on the stairs, staring into the river Danube. Next to him, as you can see, a crumpled coat lies at his side, possibly a reference to one of his poems, Yellow Grass, where he likens his country to a petaled coat. A symbolic image that appears even stronger due to the statue's proximity to the parliament is one of the great landmarks of the Hungarian nation. Nevertheless, this sad sculpture is said to have been inspired by another one of his poems, By the Danube. Well, on to another literary part of Budapest. The Petofi. Oh, there we go. This is a statue. Don't you? I mean, these countries. This is obviously Shakespeare. You can see Shakespeare written there down on the side of the wall. But Shakespeare, being neither Hungarian nor Balkan, yet his works are so greatly respected and appreciated in these countries. They've built a more than life-size bronze statue in his recognition. So it just continued to put a smile on my face, being a literary person, to walk around these countries, seeing such physical, three-dimensional, magnificent statuary respecting the literary arts. This next photo is the outside sign of the Petofi Literary Museum, established in 1954. How many of you have a literary museum in your town? The Petofi Museum was actually, well, the Petofi House dates back to 1909, and it was kept the archives of Sándor Petofi. Sándor Petofi was born in 1823 in Hungary, part of the Austrian Empire at the time, and also died at a very young age of 26. One of the greatest Hungarian poets and a revolutionary who symbolized the Hungarians' desire for freedom. Petofi disliked school, although he was very academic, and saw it as constraining his creativity and authoritarianism pressing him down. He left a private school very early and became interested in acting. at which time his father disowned him, as parents are wont to do when their children don't follow in the footsteps that they expect. Petofi then spent a number of years traveling as a wandering actor and poet. He enlisted as a soldier in the Austro-Hungarian Imperial Army, but only lasted there for a few years, deemed unfit for duty due to the psychological impact service was having on him. Perhaps some PTSD, I don't know. After leaving the army, Petofi returned to his education, and he met Michelet, a revolutionary writer who helped him get some of his poems published. Petofi quickly became the voice behind the revolutionary movement to centralize Hungary and extract it from the Austrian Empire. He was married in 1947, but died shortly thereafter. He's a much recognized hero of Hungary. Children are required to study his poetry and history in schools, while there are museums, schools, and statues dedicated to him everywhere. It was a wonderful museum. When I happened to be there, there was an exhibit of Dante, and it was a special exhibit, aside from the fixed exhibit that most museum has. They have a rotating exhibit. The museum is dedicated to enriching the cultural attributes of Hungarian literature. And it's quite a place. I encourage you to visit it a chance when you get there. Next photo album, Alan, is right outside of the museum is another three-dimensional representation of a book. One book, the one in the background you can see, is closed. The one up front has a fountain spewing from the middle of the spine. So it was tremendously respectful to be traveling through these countries and to see the great interest, the great authors, the great respect that they have for literature in their countries. And finally, this last photo is the very last photo that I took on my 7-week trip. This one also happens to be in Budapest. And this is a monument to Imre Nagy, the prime minister, who together with the vast majority of Hungarians revolted against the USSR in 1956. 2 years after the failed Hungarian Revolution, Nagy was executed on the charges of treason. He was secretly charged with organizing the overthrow of the Hungarian People's Democratic State. He was secretly tried, found guilty, sentenced to death, and executed in 1958. His execution and his sentencing was never even made public until after the execution, and he was buried in a mass grave. Well, that about concludes my little travelogue from having had the great opportunity to visit some of these countries. And I want to finish up with a poem from the great Hungarian poet Sándor Petőfi, and you'll be able to see why he is such a national institution, rising up the spirits of the people. Okay, you ready? Sabers outshine chains and fetters. It's the sword that one's arm betters, yet we wear grim chains and shackles. Swords slash through these damned manacles. God of Hungarians, we swear unto thee that slaves we shall no longer be. Magyar's name will tell the story worthy of our erstwhile glory. We must scrub off, fiercely cleansing, century of shame condensing. God of Hungarians, we swear unto thee that slaves we shall no longer be. Where our grave mounds bulge in gray earth, grandsons kneel and say their prayers, while in blessing words they mention all our sainted names' ascension. God of Hungarians, we swear unto thee that slaves we shall no longer be. Wow. Can you imagine being a young elementary school child reciting this poem in class? What great love for country and enthusiasm for patriotism, that will give you. We swear unto thee that slaves we shall no longer be. Okay, folks, that's my posting, probably my last posting from my trip. I also made a short trip to Italy. We'll see if I can get that one if online. If not, that's what I saw and where I saw it. Nothing like a good warm drink in the morning. Okay, folks, that's it for our show today. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you listened to it twice and got out twice as much enjoyment as listening to it once. Maybe you could watch it on YouTube and listen to it on your headphones while you're driving down the road. In any case, we're glad to have you. Leave us a message on Facebook. Let us know who you'd like to see on the show, what segments you enjoy hearing the most, what guests you'd like to have back, and what new guests you'd like us to try and bring onto the show for you. Thank you very much for tuning in. We hope that we can bring a little bit of book joy to your life during this coming week, and bring some book joy to our life, and let us know what you're reading. Let us know what authors fascinate you. Let us know the topics you want to hear from. Okay, everybody, have a great week. Carry on. That's the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Bye-bye. Thank you.